Imagine this. The Philistines were once the main enemies of the Israelites, the adversaries of the prophets, a nation often described in Holy Scriptures as idol worshippers. But today, Palestine, a name derived from Philistine, has become a symbol of Islamic resistance. On the other hand, the Israelites were once a blessed people, the nation of prophets. But now their name is associated with modern Israel and the Zionist movement, which has become the primary enemy of the Islamic world. What really happened? How did two nations with such distinct historical images end up swapping roles in history? Stay tuned, because we're about to uncover how history can be manipulated, how identities can shift, and how narratives can be used as political tools. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Abah Files, where we uncover history, conspiracies, and archaeology like never before. 1. The ancient Philistines, enemies of the prophets. The Philistines were seafaring people from the Aegean region who arrived on the shores of Canaan around the 12th century BCE. They established 5 major cities: Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, Gath. The Philistines were known as formidable warriors and idol worshippers who frequently clashed with the Israelites. One of the most famous stories is the battle between Goliath, Jalut, and David, Prophet Dawood in Islam. At the time, the Philistines had military superiority, while the Israelites were still a growing nation. 1 Samuel 17:4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. 1 Samuel 17:8-9. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." In Islam, the story of Goliath and David is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah 2251. So they defeated them by the will of Allah, and David killed Goliath, and Allah gave him kingship and wisdom and taught him what he willed. And if it were not for Allah checking some people by means of others, the earth would have been corrupted. But Allah is full of bounty to the worlds. Centuries later, the Philistines declined and were ultimately destroyed by Babylon and Assyria around the 7th century BCE. They disappeared from history, or so we thought. Another notable conflict between the Philistines and a prophet from the Israelites was their capture of Samson, Nabi Shamun. They exploited his weakness, gouged out his eyes, and paraded him in humiliation. Judges 16:21. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. 2. The Israelites, from chosen people to exiled nation. The Israelites were initially a nation guided by divine revelations and prophets. Their golden age was under King David and King Solomon, who established a great kingdom centered in Jerusalem. The concept of the chosen people, in the context of the Israelites, evolved in both the Bible and the Quran. In the Bible, Old and New Testament, the Old Testament states that the Israelites were chosen by God, as seen in Deuteronomy 7:6. "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession." However, this privilege was conditional. If they disobeyed God, they would be punished. Jeremiah 31:32 records God's warning, "Because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord." In the New Testament, Jesus, Esau, spoke about how the status of the Israelites changed. Matthew 21:43 states, "Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit." This suggests that the status of God's chosen people was transferred to others who remained obedient. In the Quran acknowledges that the Israelites were once a chosen nation, as in Surah Al-Baqarah 247. "O children of Israel, remember my favor that I have bestowed upon you, and that I preferred you over the worlds." However, many verses also describe their disobedience, such as Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:13. "But because of their breach of their covenant, we cursed them and made their hearts hard. They distort words from their proper usages and have forgotten a portion of that of which they were reminded." In Surah Al-Baqarah 2:124, When Prophet Ibrahim, asked for leadership to remain in his descendants, Allah replied, "My covenant does not include the wrongdoers." This means that even though they were descendants of prophets, they could lose their status if they strayed from God's commands. Both in the Bible and the Quran, the children of Israel were initially chosen by God. However, due to their violations of the covenant and disobedience, that status was revoked. In Christian teachings, the status of the chosen people shifted to the followers of Jesus who obey God, while in Islam, the chosen people are those who have faith and piety, regardless of ethnic origin. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:122. O children of Israel, remember my favor which I have bestowed upon you, and that I favored you over all nations at that time. This verse emphasizes that the children of Israel were once God's chosen people, but they were also reminded not to deviate from his teachings. In the Bible, Exodus 19:5-6. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. The name Israel itself comes from the prophet Israel, or Israel, or Jacob in Islam, indicating that the nation was originally inhabited by the descendants of Israel, or the children of Israel, adherents of Judaism. After King Solomon's death, the kingdom split and was eventually conquered by Babylon in 587 BCE. The Jews were exiled, the temple was destroyed, and they scattered across the world. During the Roman era, the Jews rebelled, but were expelled permanently in 70 CE and 135 CE. Here's where it gets interesting. After their exile, the Romans renamed Judea to Palestina. This was meant to erase Jewish ties to the land, as the name referenced the ancient Philistines. And this marked the beginning of the identity shift that we will explore further. 3. From Philistines to Palestinians, how identities changed. Although Palestine comes from Philistines, modern Palestinians are not direct descendants of the ancient Philistines. They are more closely related to Arab Canaanite tribes who lived in the region for centuries. The name Palestine became official under Roman rule, 2nd century CE, and continued through Byzantine, Islamic, and Ottoman periods. The Philistines vanished in the 7th century BCE, while Palestine as a region remained. So is modern Palestine the same as ancient Philistia? However, the name endured for centuries, and today, Palestine has become a symbol of resistance against modern Israel. The Israelites became Zionists, a shift in historical narratives. The Israelites were once the people of prophets, but after their exile, their identity transformed. In the 19th century, the Zionist movement emerged, seeking to reclaim the Holy Land. In 1948, with Western support, they established modern Israel. Israel claims to be the continuation of the ancient Israelites, but many historians question their genetic link to the original Israelites. The oppressed Bani Israel of the past became the oppressors of Palestine today. Israel's propaganda, an old war that hasn't ended. Some groups in Israel, particularly extremist Zionists, use the narrative that the conflict with Palestine is a continuation of the biblical war between the Israelites and the Philistines. They believe, in the past, David defeated Goliath, the Philistine giant. Now Israel must defeat Palestine. In the past, the land was promised to the Israelites by God. Now Israel must reclaim it from non-Jews. And this is how the historical narrative has completely changed. The Philistines, once enemies of Islam, are now associated with Palestine, which is defended by Muslims because Palestine is neither Philistia nor its descendants. The Israelites, once protagonists in the stories of the prophets, are now linked to modern Israel and Zionism. This is not just about history, but about how identity is used as a political tool. 5. Conclusion. Is history a tool of propaganda? History proves that national identities can shift based on who controls the narrative. The Philistines are gone, but Palestine remains. The Israelites were prophets' followers, but Zionism rebranded their identity. Israel versus Palestine is not just history, it's also politics and propaganda. So can history be used for political agendas? Absolutely. And that's why we must always question the narratives we are told. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll keep exposing hidden truths on Abah files. See you in the next episode.